Hello, good morning, everyone. Today I would like to introduce the cover level strategy. That's the chapters we have the finish the functional level strategy, business level strategy, and today I would like to introduce the cover level strategy. Okay, so the objective of this chapter, I would like to introduce the three types of the cover level strategy in terms of the horizontal integration, vertical integration, and the strategy outsourcing. In addition, here we will also talk about why and under what conditions the cover level relationship, such as the strategic alliance, they can substitute for the vertical integration. Okay, so here today I will focus on the three types: strategy, horizontal integration, vertical integration, and the strategy outsourcing. So for the cover level strategy, what is the cover level strategy? Actually, cover level strategy involves the choice strategy manager have to make. First, for the cover level strategy, the managers they have to decide in which business and industries they wanted to compete. And the second, they also have to select which value creation activity they should perform in this business. And finally, they also have to determine how it should enter conflict or exist business or industry to maximize the overall the company's over the long-term profitability. So, for example, like the Taiwan company's uni president Tong Yi, I remember last year they acquired Cannafor. They entered a new business in terms of the supermarket business. So this is kind of the cover level strategy. And here, for the cover level strategy, there are three types: horizontal integration, vertical integration, and the strategy outsourcing. And the three strategy primarily directed toward improving a company's competitive advantage and their profitability in his current business over industry. So later, I will introduce the three types of the strategy in detail. So first, horizontal integration, single industry cover level strategy. In the business environment, we could formulate many the companies' profitable growth and expansion often entail finding ways to successfully compete within a single market or business over time. So, for example, we can see like the McDonald's. McDonald's they just stayed on the fast food this the business, and for the Walmart they focus on the discount retailing. So they just stayed within a single market over the single business. And the firms they stayed within a single market. It allowed the company to focus all of its resources. For example, like their managerial, financial, technological, and functional resources and capability on competing successful in one area. And this they also allowed the company to stay focused on what it knows, and that's the best. And of course, because this is the company, they just stayed within the single market. So we can find like this the company do not make the mistake of entering the new industry in which its existing resources and capability create little value over where the whole new set of the competitive industry force. Because different the industry, they have the different competitive industry force. So of course, if this the company they just stayed within the single market over time, this the company does not face anticipated threat. Okay, so this is the horizontal integration. And next we give the example like the Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, we know it is very famous in the soft drink industries, right? Actually, many years ago, the Coca-Cola they wanted to expand into the movie business, and so they acquired Columbia Pictures. They also acquired, because they wanted to enter the wine industry, so they also acquired the large California wine maker. However, the Coca found the light because he lacked the competence to success compete in this new industry. So finally, the Coca-Cola they sold this to business and suffered the significant loss. And here we wanted to talk about that, yes, even this company has stayed in one industry or stayed in one market over time. However, we can find the light. These firms that wanted to sustain a successful business over time. It's not easy. It can be difficult because of the changing the condition in the environment, especially the technology change and the customer needs. So because of the changing condition in the environment, such as the advance in technology that allowed new competitors into the market, or because of the changing the customer needs. So in this kind of situation, if these the firms they wanted to strengthen their companies the business model, maybe they can use the horizontal integration. So here we say that one corporate level strategy that has been widely used to help the manager strengthen their company's business model is the horizontal integration. Okay, so next we will introduce the horizontal integration. What is the horizontal integration? And the advantage and the disadvantages of the horizontal integration. Okay, so here, horizontal integration means that the process of acquiring or merging with the industry competitor to achieve the competitive advantage that arises from a large size and scope of operations. So, for example, like Lenovo. Okay, I think most of you know the Lenovo is the companies, right? It's the famous PC, the computers firms. Actually, Lenovo acquired the PC department of the IBM, right? Because they acquired that, so this can like the Lenovo, they can increase, okay, their the market and the market share. Yeah, and this is also a kind of horizontal integration because they acquire or merge with the industry competitors, right? And here I wanted to say is that acquisition and merger is the different. What is the acquisition? Acquisition means the company uses the capital resources, for example, like the cash or stock, to purchase a larger company. And the merger is agreement between equals to for two companies, the operation and create the new entirety, create the new. Okay, so they are different. So we can see that acquisition means the A firms acquired B. So maybe in the future, yeah, the companies, they will use the A firm's name over the B firm's name. Yeah, it depends. Okay, it depends how the company's decision. And the merger means, for example, A firm merge with the B, right? So because they will create the new firm. They will change their name like the C firm. So, for example, like the Warner Media acquired the Discovery, and then they create the new entity. Okay, so the name there, the company name becomes as the Warner Brothers the Discovery. So the acquisition and the merger is the different. So maybe you have to understand this. And next, we talk about the benefit or the advantage of the horizontal integration. Horizontal integration can help firms to lower their cost structure, increase the layered product differentiation, and they can also allow the firm leverage a competitive advantage more boldly. They can also reduce the rivalry within the industry, increase the bargaining power over supplier over the buyers. Okay, first, horizontal can help a firm to lower their cost structure. Yeah, this is because the firms acquire, for example, like the A firms acquire the B firms, right? So this they can increase the economy of the scales. So for example, like the AT&T in the United States, AT&T actually they acquired some they acquired the other telecommunication firms. So because they acquire these firms, so it means they get more market share, acquire more the customer. So this can increase their utilization of their service, the customers, right? So this can increase their economies of the upscale. And because like the acquisition, the merger, they can also reduce the duplication of resources between the two companies. For example, A firm is merged with the B firms, and these the two firms, they both of them have, for example, like the marketing department, R&D department. Yeah, however, the horizontal integration, they can reduce the duplication of the resources, also like this kind of the department between the two firms, so they can lower the cost of the structure. And the next, increase the product depreciation. Okay, this is because A firm acquired B firms, right? Maybe they also can acquire the, for example, like their innovative the new products. So by increasing the flow of innovative new products, that the companies, the sales force can sell to customers at a premium price. So here, for example, like pharmaceutical firms, ADD, they paid the 65 billion US dollars to the Omicron system to acquire its new cancer providing the drug. Yeah, because they wanted to increase their product categories. And the albeit the rival Bristol Myers Squibb. Okay, so here the horizontal integration can help firms increase the product differentiation. They can acquire. Yeah, if they acquire these firms, they can also own their products, so they can increase their product differentiation. And the third, horizontal integration can help a firm leverage a competitive advantage more broadly. So firms that have resources over the capability that could be valuable deployed across the multiple market segments over the geography. And the next, reduce the rivalry within the industries. Yeah, this is because the A firm, for example, in the listed industries, A acquire B over A merge with the B. So we can see that acquiring over merging with the competitor, this can help the firm to eliminate the excess capacity in these industries. Industry which trigger the price the worms. So I think is the logic is that because we acquired over merged with the companies, right? In these the industries. So it means the competitors, the number of the competitors will be reduced. So here, of course, this will reduce the rivalry within the listed industries. And finally, horizontal integration can increase the bargaining power over the suppliers, over the buyers. Yeah, this is because the company becomes a much larger buyer of the supplier products. Yeah, because it acquired the other firms, so this the focus firms, they become the darker, so they can have the more the bargaining power over the suppliers. So this company can use this as a leverage to bargain down the price it paid for is the input or materials. Yeah, so this can help them to lower its the cost structures, right? And when the companies has the greater ability to raise the price to the buyer over the bargain down the price paid for the input, it has the opportunity increased the market power. Okay, so the benefit of horizontal integration here we indicate the 5 points. First, lower the cost structure. Second, increase the product differentiation. Third, leverage a competitive advantage more broadly. Fourth, reduce the rivalry within the industry. And finally, can increase the bargaining power over the supplier, over buyers. Okay, so this is the benefit of the horizontal integration. Of course, horizontal integration, they have some disadvantages. Okay, some problems. Okay, here, problems such as the problems associated with the emerging the very different the companies the cultures. So we can think about it, yeah, because the two firms, A firm and B firm, they are different. The companies, of course, they have the different company cultures. Yeah, so if the A acquire B over A merge with B, they may have the conflict of the cultures, right? So, for example, like BenQ and Siemens. Okay, I think BenQ is the Taiwan's companies. Yeah, I'm not sure if you understand this the companies BenQ. Okay, and the other is the Siemens is the German's the companies. So you can see that many years ago, long ago, the BenQ they want to acquire the mobile phone department of the Siemens. Yeah. However, this acquisition is failed. Yeah, it's failed. Why is it failed? I think the acquisition failed. Of course, there are many the reasons. However, one of the main reasons is because of the cultures. Yes, so thank you. So here you can see in this slide showed that lesson learned from the 35 billion NT dollars for the BenQ. Yeah, because the BenQ in this acquisitions is suffered a significant loss. Yeah, because this acquisition is failed. Yeah, is failed. Yeah, is failed. So we can see one of the reasons just like showed this because of the company's the cultures. Okay, and the third, horizontal integration may cause the higher management turnover in the acquired company, especially when the acquisition is the hardest one. And finally, horizontal integration may make this the companies come into conflict with the FTC. Yeah, a government agency responsible for the enforced antitrust law. Okay, so this is the problems with the horizontal integration. Okay, so next we will talk about the vertical integration. Okay, vertical integration means the firm enter the new industry to strengthen the core business model. And for the vertical integration, okay, it can classify into backward vertical integration and forward vertical integration. Backward vertical integration means that backward into an industry that produce the input for the company's products. And the forward vertical integration means forward into an industry that use, distribute, or sell the company's products. So first, we talk about the backward vertical integration. So, for example, like the IBM integrated the backward into the chip and the memory disk industry to produce the component that work inside is the mainframes and the servers. So we can see backward vertical integration means for example, like the input of the materials. So the backward like the IBM integrate backward into the chip and the memory disk industry. And the forward vertical integration means that this company forward into an industry that close to the user over the channel, right? So for example, like the Apple. Apple in 2001 entered the retail industry when it decided to establish a chain of the Apple Store to sell its PC and iPod and iPad. Yeah, so we can see that because the Apple entered the retail industry, it's more close to the customers, to the channel. Right, so it's kind of the forward vertical integration, and like IBM's, they are integrate backward into because they wanted to produce the chip and memory the disk. Yeah, so here they can put the components, the input inside is the mainframe and the servers. So like IBM. Okay, here is to do the backward vertical integration. Here, and the last, increasing the profitability through the vertical integration. Actually, vertical integration can help firms increase their product differentiation, lower their cost, and reduce the industry competition when it Okay, when vertical integration can facilitate invest in efficiency, enhance the specialized access, right? And vertical integration, when the vertical integration can protect product quality over when the vertical integration can help firms improve their scheduling. Okay, so here, facilitating investing in a specialized assets. So here we have to understand what the meaning of the specialized assets. Specialized assets is one that is designed to perform a specific task and whose the value is significantly reduced in his next best use. Yeah, so companies invest in specialized assets because these assets allow them to lower their cost structure or to better differentiation their products to facilitate the premium pricing. So, for example, like the Apple iOS system is the specialized assets for the Apple. Why? This is because we can find the light. Just Apple can use the iOS systems. Other companies cannot use it. So the iOS systems is kind of the specialized assets for the Apple. So the Apple can use these assets to differentiate their products from the other companies, right? And like the Toyota, Toyota invested in specialized equipment to help them to lower manufacturing the cost and develop better quality products. And vertical integration, maybe they can also help firms to enhance their product quality. So by entering industry at the other stage of the value-added chains, the companies can often enhance the quality of the product in its core business, and the strength is the differentiation advantage. So for example, for the product quality over the service the quality, here we can say that ownership of retail outlets may be necessary if the acquired standard of after-sales service for companies' products are to be maintained. So, for example, here we can say the Apple. Apple established its retail have the Apple Store, right? So, and like the Asus, you have the Royal Club. If you were the computer broken, you can send you the computers to the Asus Royal Club. And we can say both these the outlet, they can help them to provide the good the after sales the service, right? So we can also say that the Apple the store. Apple have is the Apple Store. They can provide the standard of the, for example, like the service to their customers. And Asus, is the Royal Club. As I said, if you want the products, you want the computer is broken, you can send this. So if the required standard of after the sales the service, vertical integration maybe can help you to enhance your the service the quality over the products the quality or appreciate the after sales service. And the second, if the firm found like local supply like the capability to produce the ingredients over the output or materials of the quality is the demand. So for example, like the McDonald's. McDonald's in Russia, it do the vertical integration through the local food industries. Yeah, because they wanted to control that, because they wanted to make sure they are the input of materials the quality, right? So like the McDonald's, they constructed the world's largest the food processing plant in Russia. So we can say that even the firms do backward vertical integration over the forward vertical integration. Okay, forward vertical integration like the Apple. Okay, Apple Store, the ASUS, the Royal Club. This can enhance their service the quality and enhance their after sales service quality, right? And like the McDonald's, they do the backward vertical integration. Yeah, so they can control their input, their materials over the ingredients, the qualities. Yeah, so here, this is why here we said that vertical integration can help firms enhance the product over the service the quality. And vertical integration also can help firm improve their scheduling. Yeah, so here vertical integration makes a firms the quicker, easier, and more the cost effective to plan, coordinate, and schedule the transfer of a product. So, for example, in the current industry like Ford do the backward vertical integration. So the Ford integrate the backward into the steel foundries, iron oil shipping, and iron oil production. So here, yeah, because the Ford that can control it. So here, help the Ford, yeah, to produce their products efficiently and improve their scheduling. Yeah. Okay, so this is the some about the vertical integration here. So here we talk about vertical integration can help firms increase their profitability. Okay, if it can facilitate the invest in the efficiency. Okay, enhance the specialized assets, or it can protect the product quality and result in the improved scheduling. And of course, vertical integration also has its problems and the disadvantage. Here, yeah, vertical integration sometimes may make the firm to increase their cost structure. Yeah, and the disadvantage that arise when the technology is changing fast, and when the demand is also changing fast, and the companies cannot unpredictable. Yeah, so later we will talk about the problems with the vertical integration. So here, while the vertical integration sometimes may increase the cost structures, yeah, firm can raise the cost over time if it continue to purchase input from the company-owned supplier. When low-cost independent supplier, they can supply the same input exist. Okay, so here, why would a company-owned supplier develop such a higher cost structures? Yeah, we can say that because the firm they do the vertical integration, right? So you can see this layer the company owned the supplier, or sometimes here we call it is the in-house the supplier. Because in-house the supplier do not have to compete with the independent outside supplier for order. So you can imagine that, yeah, because maybe the in-house the supplier, they will say that, yeah, anything over everything I produced, yes, the other division, they will buy it, right? So the in-house, the supplier do not have to compete with the other firms, the outside firms. So they have the much less incentive to look for new ways to produce the to reduce the operating cost or increase the components the quality. Yeah, they do not have this incentive. Yeah, so because they do not have to compete with the outside the suppliers. So as I mentioned, everything I produced, yeah, our company, the other the division must buy it, right? So the in-house supplier simply pass on cost increase to the other divisions. And this kind of the activities, sometimes we call it is the transfer pricing. Okay, it means the price let one division. Okay, this means the price let one the other divisions. Okay, transfer the other. So the other divisions they must buy it, right? Okay, and the other is the bureaucratic the cost. Yeah, this the cost refers to the cost of the solving the transaction difficulty. Let's erase from the managerial efficiency. So, for example, when the companies own the suppliers or in-house the suppliers, yeah, because they do not have the incentive, yeah, to reduce its cost, to increase efficiency over innovation, right? So the firms that have to spend a lot of the time and the resources, yeah, to solve these problems, to reduce the managerial inefficiency. So this is kind of the cost. So this is one vertical integration. Sometimes will increase the cost structure for these firms. The key problems is that, okay, the in-house the suppliers, they have the much less incentive to look at the good ways to produce their products. Yeah, they have the less incentive to look for new ways to reduce operation cost, or to pay more the attention on the innovation. No, they will do not it. So this will increase the overall cost structure for these firms. And the other is the technological change. Yeah, when the technological it changes so fast, vertical integration is not good for firms. Yeah, because vertical integration may lock a company into an old, inefficient technology and prevent it from changing to a new one that will strengthen its business model. So it's the bigger problems. Okay, here I gave you the Sony TV as the example here. Sony TV, actually the Sony, they do the vertical integration, so they invest a lot of the resources, yeah, to into the CRT. Okay, the CRT the technology. Okay, CRT the technologies. However, here because the Sony they do the vertical integration, they invest a lot of the resources, time to this the knowledge. Okay, so the Sony will look into this the technology. Yeah, so here we can see because the Sony will look into the outdated CRT the technology. So it was slow to recognize that the future was the flatted screen. We call it LCD screen. Yeah, so and it did not exist the CRT the business. Yeah, this is because the since they invest a lot of resources, so actually it's not easy exist this the CRT the business, right? So finally, because the Sony was locked into the outdated the CRT technology, so finally he allied with the Samsung, because the Samsung he focused on the flat screen, the LCD, the screen, right? So it has this kind of the technology. So finally, the Sony it aligned with the Samsung, and the Samsung supply the LCD screen that are used in is the Bravia, the TVs. So you can see because the technology change is so fast, vertical integration in this kind of situation is not good for the firms. And the other one, okay, that's the one we talk is the technology change. Because the other one is for the demand change. If the demand, for example, for the car, okay, if the demand for the car suddenly plummet, so we can see the car maker may find himself burdened with the warehouse full of the component part is no longer needs. So this will increase the firms the inventory the cost. Because the car demand suddenly plummet. So you can see maybe the imported component part. The firms they will burn with the warehouse full of the component part input materials that is no longer needs. So this will increase the firms the cost, right? So vertical integration can be risky when demand is changing so fast, because this will make these firms very difficult to manage the volume over the flow of products along the value added chains. Okay, so we can see vertical integration have is the advantage and the disadvantage. So here, okay, we indicated the problems, the disadvantage in terms of vertical integration. Sometimes may increase the cost structures, and when the technology and the demand change is so fast, vertical integration is not good for the firms. And then next, we will talk about the alternative to vertical integration. So we now we have talked about the advantage and the disadvantage of the vertical integration. So here, our questions here is that it is possible to obtain the differentiation and the cost saving advantage associated with the vertical integration without having to bear the problems and the cost associated with these strategies. So it means that can we just keep advantage of the vertical integration and without the having the disadvantage of vertical integration? How do you think? You think yes or no? Yes, maybe. Okay, we can use the other ways, like a long-term corporate relationship, to substitute. Sometimes we can use the long-term corporate relationship to substitute the vertical integration, and we can keep the advantage of the vertical integration, and without having the disadvantage of vertical integration. Okay, so if the firm can enter into the long-term corporate relationship with the other companies industry along the value-added chains, yes, we can do it. We can achieve these goals. Okay, so sometimes we call the long-term corporate relationship. Sometimes we also call it is the quasi integration. Now, so we can use a long-term corporate relationship, okay, to substitute the vertical integration, so that the firms they can keep, okay, the advantages of a vertical integration, and without having the disadvantage of vertical integration. So long-term the corporate relationship, okay, is important for firms. Okay, so quasi integration. Quasi integration means that the use of the long-term relationships or investment into some of the activities normally performed by suppliers or buyers in place of the full ownership of operations that are backward or forward in the supply chain. So the firms, for example, like firms, they use this, they can share the expense of the investment in production assets over inventory. Or the firms, they make the long-term supply over long-term the supply over the purchase guarantees. Okay, so this is for the quasi integration. And last, okay, we talk about the strategic alliance and the long-term contracting. Here, strategic alliance. What is the strategic alliance? Strategic alliance is a long-term agreement between the two or more companies to jointly develop new products, process, or service, or they wanted to achieve the strategic goals. Okay, and actually for the strategic alliance, in the strategic alliance topic, there are many types of the strategic alliance. For example, some firms they will do like the marketing strategic alliance or R&D strategic alliance. Yes, and if the firm they want to enter a foreign market, yeah, the company may also use the strategic alliance to cooperate with the local companies and enter the foreign market. So there are many types of the strategic alliance. Okay, and for the strategic alliance, here most of the company agree to make a specialized investment and work jointly to find ways to lower cost or increase their products quality. And for the strategic alliance, sometimes it can substitute for the vertical integration. And actually, strategic alliance, it can help a firm to avoid the problems. Okay, like for example, like we mentioned earlier, they can avoid the problems like the bureaucratic cost. Yeah, like right from the managerial efficiency. So here, we said that the long-term corporate relationship is important for firms. So here, we want to talk about the strategy to build a long-term corporate relationship. How? Okay, or the ways to build the long-term corporate relationship. And here we introduce the three strategy in terms of the hostage taking, credible commitments, and the third, maintain the market discipline. So first, hostage taking. What is the hostage taking? It means that both the companies exchange the valuable resources to guarantee that both the companies, each partner to agreement will keep its side of the bargain. So here we get the example like the Northrop and the Boeing. Yeah, here we can say this the case. We see this the case. Northrop is the major subcontractor for the Boeing, the commercial airline the division. So at the later times, Northrop actually invests a lot of resources, yeah, to build some the specialized assets for the Boeing. And at the same time, Boeing is the major supplier to Northrop's the defense division. So at the later times, the Boeing also invest a lot of resources, yeah, to develop the specialized assets for the Northrop. So we can see both part they invest a lot of the resources, yeah, to develop the specialized assets for each other, right? So they are mutually depends on Northrop depends on the Boeing, and the Boeing is also depends on the Northrop. So they are mutually dependent. So this kind of the specialized investment, this specialized assets is kind of hostage. Yes, so here each company holds a hostage the specialized investment the others has made. So this is the case of the hostage taking. So we can see both the companies they depends on each other. So both the party, okay, both the companies are unlikely to renege on any pricing agreement with each others. Okay, so this is a kind of host taking. So here we can see that host taking is means that, like here, okay, the specialized investment. And the next, okay, credible commitment. What is the credible commitment? Credible commitment is means that it's a believable promise over the pledge to support the development of a long-term relationship between the companies. Okay, so here, for example, take the GE and IBM as the example. GE is one of the major supplier of advanced semiconductor chip to the IBM. So the GE, yeah, is also invest a lot of the resources, yeah, to help the IBM, yeah, to produce the semiconductor chips. Yeah, and at this times the IBM publicly, okay, so the key point is publicly commit himself to purchase the chip from GE for 10 years period. Yeah, and at the same time, the IBM also put some money into the chip development process. So in these situations, we can see that GE make a substantial investment in specialized assets, and the IBM publicly commit itself. Yeah, let's say that, okay, because the GE, yeah, you make the substantial investment in specialized assets, okay, to produce the semiconductor chips for us. Yeah, so I publicly commit. We said that, yeah, so we will purchase, okay, purchase the chip from you for 10 years the period. Yeah, they also put some money. So IBM also do the credible commitment, right? So here, the IBM made a credible commitment that it will continue to purchase chip from the GE, okay, from the GE. And it is the problem is yes, if the one day, yeah, because the IBM it publicly committed himself, they wanted to buy the chip from the GE, right? Yeah, if the one day IBM, okay, violate their commitment, Now you can think that the IBM will also suffer the great loss. Yeah, because they will, if they do not, okay, commit, okay, if they do not, buy the, like let's say, if they do not purchase chip from the GE for the 10 years periods, maybe this will hurt the IBM's reputation. Maybe in the future, no companies will cooperate with the IBM. Okay, so this is the credible commitment. And the other one is the maintain market discipline. And here we introduced two types, okay, of ways. So first one, there may be the firms, they can renew their contract, maybe every 3 to 5 years. So here, all contracts are periodically renegotiate, maybe as I said, every 3 to 5 year. So the supplier knows that if it fails to line up to its commitment, maybe in the future their partners will not cooperate with them, right? So its partner may refuse to renew this contract. So the first way is the renewed and renegotiate this contract. Yeah, maybe every 3 to 5 years. And the other ways, okay, maybe the firm can use the parallel sourcing policy. Firms can use the parallel sourcing policy and enter into a long-term contract with at least 2 suppliers for the same component. Yeah, so here the parallel sourcing policy means the firms, they can enter into a long-term contract with at least 2, okay, 2, 3, or the 4 supplier, yeah, for the same component. Yeah, because this agreement can protect the companies against that supplier late adapt an uncooperative attitude. Yeah, if this really happened, the companies, they have the chance, right? They have the opportunity because they can switch all its business to the other supplier, to the other suppliers partners. Yeah, so you can see, actually like the Apple, yeah, Apple, they also, okay, they cooperate. For example, like assembly their smartphones. So we can see for the smartphone, the Apple cooperated with the Foxconn and the Dixon. Yeah, so they use the Paris the sourcing policy. So you can imagine that if the one day the Foxconn over the Dixon, yeah, they do not want to help the Apple to assemble their smartphones. Okay, I think the Apple don't worry about that because they use the parallel sourcing policies, so they can switch all its business to the other suppliers over to the other firms to help them to assemble their smartphones. Yeah, so we can see in the business, in the real business, the many firms they use these policies. Okay. So here, okay, we introduce the 3 strategies. And this strategy can help a firm to build a long-term cooperative relationship in terms of the host-taking, credible commitment, and maintaining market discipline. Yeah, so this is for the strategy for the long-term, the how to build the long-term cooperative relationship. Okay, so the final strategy for the corporate level strategy is the strategy outsourcing. Okay, strategy outsourcing this is the decision to allow the one or more of the company's the value chain activity or functions to be performed by independent specialist companies. So the here we call it as the independent specialist companies. It means that maybe these the firms they just force the it force the one the value added functions, for example, like the manufacturing. Now, meaning the independent specialist the companies, okay, like the Taiwan companies like the Jiyang and the Baocheng. Yeah, they focus on the manufacturing, right? So like the Jiyang focus on the clothes the manufacturing, and like the Baocheng, it focus on the shoes the manufacturing. So this is kind of independent special list the companies. Yeah, and the firm during the outsold. Okay, this also the activity can be the outsold may encompass an entire function. Okay, so such as the manufacturing, the function, customer service, especially the call center. So you can also find that many the companies they will also their the call center to the others the countries. A lot of the countries, especially maybe that China over the southeastern countries, yeah, and some of the firms they will also layer the patient systems to the independent specialist companies. Okay, so when firm if they choose the strategy outsourcing, okay, so we can see when a firm chooses to outsource a value chain activity, it is choosing to focus on fewer value creation activities to strengthen its business model. Like the Apple, it outsourced is the smartphone assembly to assemble the smartphone. This is the function to the Foxconn and Leisure. And Apple, it focused on the product design and marketing, right? So he focused on the fewer value creation activities. And like the other firm, we can also think about like Nike. Nike also is the shoes the manufacturer to the Baocheng, and they also focus on the product design and marketing. So this is why strategic outsourcing means these firms choose to focus on the fewer value creation activity. Okay, they want to strengthen is the business model. So here, I mean the independent specialist companies. Okay, so this specialist companies, okay, they can perform one of the company's own value chain activity in a way that they contribute to a company's the differentiation advantage over lower his the cost structures. So as I mentioned, like the Nike, also there is the shoes manufacturer to the Baocheng. Yeah, so because the Baocheng is the specialist company, it just focus on in the shoes the manufacturing. So you can imagine that Baocheng he manufacturing the shoes because they help. Okay, because they help the many the companies as like the Nike, Adidas, and Puma. Okay, something like that. They help the many the firms to manufacture their the shoes. So like the Baocheng, they has the economy of the scale. So this can help these the focal firms in terms of Nike, Puma, okay, and Adidas to lower its the cost the structures. So here we can say many firms outsource activity that managers regard as the being non-code or non-strategic. Yeah, so means they are not a source of a company's distinct competence and competitive advantage. So you can see that according to the survey, according to the data, more than 16% of the all global product manufacturer is outsourced to manufacturers specialists because of pressure to reduce the cost. So we can see that actually in many the international companies like the Apple, Nike, Puma, Adidas, even the closest companies like the Gap, right? Like the Gap or like the CK, yeah, they also these the companies they just force on, okay, because the companies have the limited resources, right? So they force on their the core strategy, the business and functions. So you can see many the famous the companies they force on in the R&D, product design and marketing. And they also here, just here said, also the non-code or non-strategy function to the specialist. Yeah, so here, okay, for the manufacturer, yeah, compare the marketing compared to the R&D. Yeah, the manufacturers, okay, more than 6% the global the firms they outsource this the function to the specialist. As I said, because this the specialist they help many the companies, yeah, to produce to manufacture it, right. So because they have the economy of the scale and they also have more efficiency, so they can help the focal firms to reduce their cost structures. Okay, so these products are made under contract at the low cost global location by contract manufacturers that specialize in lower cost assembly. Yeah, so we can also say that like the Nike, Puma, and Adidas, they also their shoes the manufacturing to the tells the companies the Baocheng, right? And like the CK and the Gap, they also layer the clothes the manufacturers to the Jiyang, yeah, to the Jiyang, and this specialist actually, yeah, they have the economy of scale and they produce these the products actually with the higher quality. Okay. So here we talk about the benefit of the outsourcing. The benefit of the outsourcing, first, it can lower the focal firms the cost structure. Second, it can increase the product differentiation. And the third, they can let the focal firms focus on the distinctive competence that are critical to the firms. So lower the cost structure. So as I said, because the specialist, like the Jiyang, like the Baocheng, like the Foxconn, or like the Li-Xing, yeah, the specialists are often able to perform an activity at a lower cost than the focal companies. Yeah, this is because, as I said, they are able to recognize the scales, the economies, over other efficiencies not available to the companies. Yeah, because the specialist, okay, they buy the equipment, right? And for this, the manufacturers the activities, he required a significant investment in this the manufacturers the facilities and equipment. And because these specialists, they help the many firms to do this, right? So that according the manufacturing needs of the many the individuals, the companies. So the companies that specialized in manufacturers can obtain a huge economy of the scale in our manufacturers the facilities. Yeah, so this is why this spatial list can help the focus firms to lower the cost of the structures. And the second, because the spatial lists are also like to obtain the cost saving associated with the learning effect. Because they help the many firms to do the same thing. Right? So they try and error. They learned how to produce, how to manufacture these products with the more the efficiency, right? So here, because firms it is the manufactured similar products for several different companies, so it is able to build up cumulative volume more repeatedly. Yes, and so it's learned how to manage and operate the manufacturing process more efficiently than any of its the customer could. So you can imagine that if today, okay, the Nike, if like one day, if one day Nike really, okay, want to manufacture his shoes by himself, yeah, this will let the Nike suffer the higher cost structures. Yeah, because he do not this kind of the specialized list to achieve the economy of scale, and because they have less the experience to manufacture these shoes, right? Yeah, so maybe their shoes produce the shoes compared to the specialist, maybe is the shoes the qualities is not good as with the specialized list. Because the specialized list like the Baocheng. Yeah, because it help the many the companies to do the same thing to produce the similar the products, so you can have the economy of scale and learning, right? So it understand how to produce these products more the efficiency with the higher the quality. Yeah, Nike maybe cannot do the good as well as the specialist. And the next, increase the product differentiation. Here, for this to occur, the quality of the activity performed by a specialist must be the greater than if like the same activity were performed by the companies. And here, the quality, okay, do you remember in the functional label strategy, in this chapter, we said qualities, yeah, include the reliability and excellent, right? So here we will discuss this point. Reliability, yeah, the author thing, yeah, because the specialist, yeah, they understand how to produce the products more efficiently. Yeah, and the specialist maybe also, okay, can achieve lower the error rate in performed this activity. Yeah, because it just force only on this activity and help the many firms to do this right. Yeah, so that has developed a strong distinctive competence. It yeah, so here the achieve a lower error rate is kind of, we call it is the reliability, right? So for example, like the first strong link, okay, in Chinese code is the Weichangli. Actually, like the Weichangli have adapted Six Sigma methodology and trimmed down the defect rate associated with the manufacturers of products. Yeah. And the other dimension of the quality is the excellence. Yeah, excellence, okay, take the car industry as the example. As we know, the car makers, okay, like the Toyota, sometimes they will also some specific kind of vehicle component design activity to the specialist. Yeah, for example, such the microchipped over the card, the hairlines to the specialist. Yeah, that have the earned a reputation for the designed excellence in this the particular activities. Right. So for example, like the Just Tap 嘉兴馆店, it have the design excellence in the car hairline the design. So we can see the many the car market. They also layer the car hairlines to the Just Tap. Yeah, so we can see. So here we can see the specialist can help firm to increase product differentiation. Okay, in terms of the reliability and excellence. And the also strategy also can help firms, okay, make the focal firms focus on the core business. It allows the managers to focus their engine's resources on performed less the core activities that have the most potential to create value and competitive advantages. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, firms that have the limited resources, so of course they have to focus on their engine and their resources on the core activity that can help them to create the value and the competitive advantage. And for the this the activity we can find that for the value-added activities, okay, we can find that many the famous over international companies like the Nike, Adidas, or even like the Apple, we can see they also some the activity to the specialist and they just focus on the product design and marketing and sales. So the also, okay, the companies can enhance their core competence and create more the value for their customers. So here, like the example here, Apple Nike focus on building is the competence in product design, marketing. Yeah, even some firms may be focused on the R&D. Yeah, because we can see the product design and R&D over the even the marketing. Yeah, they have the most potential to help firms to create value and competitive advantage. So this is why, according to the survey, this is why many the companies they outsource the manufacture to the other firms and they keep the marketing and R&D and product design. It is the companies. Okay, so this is for the outsourcing. So here we can say that the benefit of outsourcing. First, it can help firm lower its cost structure. Second, it can increase the product differentiation. And the third, because the firm's the resource is limited, so this can help firms just focus on the distinctive competence that are critical to companies. Yeah, so here, of course, for the strategic outsourcing, it has its benefits. Yeah, it also have some risk of the outsourcing. So here, we will talk about the three risks of outsourcing. First, hold up. Second, yeah, outsourcing may let the companies increase the competition. And finally, the outsourcing may let this company lose the important information and lose the learning opportunities. So here, hold up. What it is means the hold up. Hold up here means the risk that the companies will become too dependent on the specialist providers of an outsourced activities. Okay, because they outsourced their activity to the specialist. However, if the list of focal firms to depends on this specialist, what will happen? Maybe in the future, the specialist will use this because it depends on me, right? So I can write the price beyond the sum previously agreed upon the rate. Yeah, because you depends on me. You do not have the choice. Yeah, if you want I to help you, yeah, you have to accept, yeah, my price, right? So maybe they will raise the price beyond the sum previously agreed upon the rate. Okay. However, for the risk of the co-op, okay, we can reduce this risk. What can we do? Okay, the risk of the co-op actually can be reduced. Do you remember we said that parallel sourcing the policy? Yes, maybe the firms, they can outsource to several suppliers and pursue a parallel sourcing the policy. Yeah, they can cooperate with the many supplier, right? 2, 3, or 4 at the same times. Yeah, if so, if I cooperate with the many suppliers, so I can have a choice. Yeah, if you want to raise the price beyond the previous agreed upon the rate, maybe I can choose. I do not cooperate with you because I can choose the other suppliers, right? Yeah, so the risk of the co-op can be reduced by outsourcing to several suppliers and purchase a parallel sourcing policy. Just cooperate with the 2, 3, 4 the suppliers. Yeah, this can help you to reduce this risk. So as I mentioned, it's like the Apple. Yeah, Apple is very smart. It's also thing over like the mobile phone assembly. Yeah, they cooperate with at least 2 firms. So like the mobile phone assembly cooperate with the Foxconn and the Lexus. So this is why I said that if one day, for example, like the Foxconn, they do not cooperate, they said they have the cooperated attitude. Yeah, the Apple, they have the choice. Okay, they can choose to do not cooperate with Foxconn and just switch always the business to the Lysian, right? So we can use, okay, the parallel sourcing policy to reduce this risk. And the third and second, sometimes outsourcing may increase the competition. Why? This is because the contract manufacturers can progress down its own learning curve, right? Because it help many firms to produce their products at the same time, so they can produce these products with a lower cost. Yeah, products with lower cost and high quality. So the contract manufacturer's capability improved, putting it at the greater the manufacturer advantage over the other firms, the focal firms, right? So the contract manufacturer can increase the scope of their activities over time. It is a wide range of the service, not just the manufacturer. Yeah, maybe finally they can produce their own products or service and in competition with their customers. Okay, so let's give you the example, like in Taiwan, in Zhanghua Shetou, this is the time. I think maybe most of the Taiwanese students will understand this. Shetou is very famous for the socks sock manufacturing. Yeah, in this the time, the socks manufacturer is very famous. So many the firms, as I said, like the Nike, Adidas, and Puma, okay, they outsold the sock manufacturers to the companies in Soto. Yeah, in Soto. So at these times we can see that more and more the companies in Soto actually they have started to produce their own socks with the brand. Yeah, brand. So in these situations, you can see like in the stock, this the business in this the market, the Nike, Puma, and the Adidas, they increased the competition because this the specialist is start to produce his own socks and his the brand, right? So here, this is why we said that sometimes also think, yeah, maybe where that the firm they will create the new competitors. Yeah, because this is specialist, as here said, they produce their own and products in competition with their customers. And finally, also make the focal firms lose the important information and lose the of the learning opportunities. Yeah, a company that is not careful can lose the important competitive information when it outsold an activity. So, for example, many computer hardware sold companies, they also the customer technical support function to the specialist. So what will happen? This specialist, yeah, they contact with the customers, so they can get more the information from the customer. They understand this customer needs, right? And they also get the feedback. However, because they also yeah, so that specialist, yeah, they understand the customer information, they get the important feedback. However, the focal firms, they do not. Yeah, so this is why we said that. Also, sometimes when make the focal firms lost important the information. I think the customer feedback is very important. However, if from the outsold to the specialist, they will lose this kind of information. And then, if they do not this kind of information, they will not understand how to improve their product. Yeah, because like the customers the feedback, customer the complaint actually is the very useful information and the valuable input to the future product design. So the firms they do not this kind of the information, so it means they also losing the opportunity for improve its capability in product design, right? So for the also thing, we can understand is the benefit and is the risk. So here for the, I think for the customer feedback, customer information, yeah, it's really important for firms. Yeah, if the specialist, of course, some people will say that specialist, yeah, we can get the information or ask the specialist to provide us this kind of the information. Yes, maybe. However, if one day the specialist, yeah, they do not provide all of the information, or they do not provide the critical feedback to the focal firms. These firms, the same, they lose this information. Yeah, at the same time, they also lose the opportunity to improve the capabilities in product. designed. Okay, so this is the risk of the outsourcing. Hold up, increased the competition, and sometimes may let firms lose the important information and the learning opportunities. Okay, so the firms, they have to think about the benefit and the risk. So for the cover level strategy in this chapter, okay, you have to understand three types of strategy. Okay, horizontal integration, vertical integration, and we can also use the long-term corporate relationship. Okay, we can use this to substitute vertical integration, and the long-term corporate relationship. Yeah, they can help us substitute the vertical integration and help firms to keep the advantage of vertical integration and without having disadvantage of vertical integration. Okay, and you also have to understand, okay, we introduced the three types of the strategy, and each the strategy have the benefit, okay, the advantage and disadvantage. Yeah, so you have to understand this. Okay, so this is the chapters about the corporate level strategy. Thank you.